This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
Insane! This is insane!
5 Singaporeans are quarantined on board the beleaguered Diamond Princess cruise ship in Japan.
Whether you call it the coronavirus or COVID-19, the global pandemic undoubtedly dominated news headlines worldwide in 2020. And it's still doing so. Millions have been infected and about 1 million have lost their lives.
It is a very transmissible virus, or rather, I think it is very clever virus. And infected individuals, even without them developing symptoms, they can carry the virus in high quantity and able to transmit the virus very effectively to another human being. And that's the reason why it's spreading so quickly.
In Asia, China recorded the first cases in the region, with Wuhan emerging as the epicenter of the first major outbreak. It quickly escalated worldwide. Cities went into lockdown. Social distancing restrictions of varying degrees swiftly imposed. Singapore, for example, introduced the circuit breaker, while neighbouring Malaysia imposed the movement control order. From Sydney, Australia to Sao Paulo in Brazil, we are all feeling the impact of the virus, which has gripped the globe since the start of the year.
This is a devil that everybody should fight.
This World News Day is unlike any other as we navigate through these challenging times. We look at how journalism coped, adapted and pushed forward when one of the worst pandemics in human history hit the world.
Well, these are very bewildering times and challenging times for everybody. And I think people want answers. They want to know how to stay safe, how to keep themselves and their families safe. They want to know how to secure their jobs and their livelihoods. So there are big concerns on people's minds and they're looking for answers. That's where journalists have to step up. We have to help get the facts out to begin with. We have to help separate the fact from the fiction. We have to help join the dots so that people can make sense of all these developments around them.
Stepping up and making a difference. Journalists around the world have gone above and beyond to tell the many stories that matter. But as the virus spread, so did fake news and misinformation.
A survey by the National Centre for Infectious Diseases revealed that 60% of participants had received fake news about COVID-19 on social media, potentially putting lives at risk during a pandemic. More than ever, it's critical that news organizations provide reliable and accurate reporting of information that the public can trust.
Well, COVID-19 has also unleashed a different pandemic of fake news. Fake news travels faster and further than real news, unfortunately. And for us in the Straits Times, we have been investing in health and science coverage for many, many years. And as a result of that, we have authoritative correspondents whom people know and they have built an affinity for. So when one of those correspondents writes about the subject, people tend to say, well, this person seems to know what they're talking about, I will believe this. And that makes a huge difference, not only for us, but also for the ability of newsmakers and opinion shapers to get good, credible information out there.
Hi Liz, how are you?
Hi Dylan, I'm good, and how are you?
For Straits Times China correspondent Elizabeth Law, getting to the heart of the story meant getting to Wuhan Huanan Seafood Market, widely considered the source of the first coronavirus infections.
We first heard about it sometime in January as we were going into the new year. We knew that there was this new SARS-like pneumonia that was going on in Wuhan. We got a sense that this was something much bigger quite early on. I think for the rest of the world, it took a little while because they thought that this might be something that was contained within China and then maybe something that was contained within Asia. And then gradually, as more cases started popping up further and further, the circumference of this virus started growing. That's when I think the world started to realize. Going into the Huanan market, I had a lot of trepidation, a lot of fear, and this is coming from someone who has done stories in protest zones, in war areas. But this was the enemy that you couldn't see, and I think that was something that I was very worried about. And I think myself and a lot of other journalists out there, for sure, at certain points in the last 8 months or so, you would have asked yourself whether or not you might have been an unsuspecting carrier of COVID-19.
From China, the coronavirus spread to Asia and fanned out across the world. Cases multiplied in waves at different speeds and continue to do so today.
8 months on from when the coronavirus first hit Singapore's shores, parts of the economy are reopening, with businesses picking up as people adapt to a new normal. But it was not too long ago that things looked very different here.
In April, Singapore went into a partial lockdown dubbed the Circuit Breaker. The central business district, usually buzzing with activity, came to a standstill, with most workplaces ordered to shut. Across the island, streets emptied out. Cars disappeared from highways. Shoppers vanished from Orchard Road. Silence fell on public facilities like swimming pools and running tracks, as people were told to stay at home and leave only for essential services. Lives disrupted overnight. People caught off guard. Many questions arose as the public sought information and answers about this new virus. For Straits Times senior health correspondent Summer Kalik, this was unlike anything she had ever encountered.
This is the worst health emergency I've covered in my more than 20 years writing on healthcare. SARS was bad and I covered that too, but SARS didn't last very long. You know, it was all over within 6 months. We've had pandemics before, like swine flu in 2009. That spread very quickly, but it wasn't as deadly, so it wasn't as bad. Now this particular pandemic, COVID-19, doesn't affect just healthcare. It affects the entire global economy. So if you look at the world today, you know, businesses are affected, schools are affected, travel has come to a standstill, people's livelihoods and people's lives have been affected. So this is really, really major. Everybody is concerned, which is very reasonable, and they want to know what they can do to protect themselves. So it's our job to tell them as much as possible. They have a lot of questions. We have access to the experts. So we go and ask the experts the questions that they have and try to give them the answers that they need. Well, we use every platform we had, print media obviously, since that's our basic. We went on the internet with panel discussions, we had webinars, we were on the radio, we had podcasts, every way we could to reach our readers.
As the number of cases in Singapore increased, stories emerged of healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic. Real people overcoming unprecedented challenges and saving lives. Following a surge in cases in March, attention turned to the foreign worker communities, which make up the bulk of the infections in Singapore. One story that captured the hearts of readers and that of Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong was Singapore's Case 42, or Mr. Raju Sakar.
We had one earlier case of a Bangladeshi worker who was in the ICU for 2 months. This was case number 42. We never gave up on him.
The first foreign worker to contract COVID-19, he spent nearly 5 months in hospital and had become a father during that time when his wife gave birth to their son in Bangladesh. Upon reading the story, Singaporeans reached out to him and his family, going on to wish him well and donate cartons of essentials for the baby. Just one of the many uplifting stories covered by journalists during these difficult times. Over in India, another heartwarming tale was covered by The Quint, which had featured the story of Darman and Ugande, a blind couple in Tamil Nadu. Deprived of their sense of sight, their lives were thrown into further disarray when the pandemic hit.
ரோட் கிராஸ் பண்ணி விடணுமா எங்கேயாச்சும் போகணுமான்னு கேட்டு நாங்கள் எங்கே போகணுமோ அது மாதிரி எங்களுக்கு சில டைமில் ரோட்டில் நின்றுருக்கோம் ஒரு 3 நிமிஷம் 5 நிமிஷம் 10 நிமிஷம் வெயிட் பண்ணி நின்றுருக்கோம்.
I think what impacted people who saw the story was the fact that you didn't see them crying. They still had a lot of spirit. They still had a, we'll fix it, we'll get over it. We've been able to collect, raise over 5,80,000 rupees for them just directly through us. And these are the kind of contributions that are coming in when everyone is dealing with a financial crisis or job loss, and so it sort of restores your faith in humanity when people respond to a story of crisis and contribute and come forth the way they have.
In Hong Kong, the COVID-19 pandemic took place against the backdrop of political and social unrest. At the South China Morning Post, one story that stood out was the mass virus testing exercise initiated by the authorities.
So our government undertook this massive exercise. It's unprecedented that everyone in Hong Kong who is willing to would be tested for COVID-19. We have 7.5 million people in Hong Kong, but about a quarter of the population took part. The reason why this story was so interesting is, apart from the health aspect, there's a lot of mistrust of the government. There's a lot of mistrust of everything that comes from Beijing. And Beijing actually has been very helpful in this whole exercise and has sent professionals across to conduct the testing, the lab test, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people haven't taken the test because they're suspicious and they're resentful about everything else.
In Indonesia, the Jakarta Post forced the hand of policymakers as cases soared.
We purposely paint a grim picture about the 6-month situation in Indonesia. I think 3 days after that, President Jokowi decided to make a big speech saying that, okay, we have to take health into consideration rather than the economy. So I think with that story, we have been successful in pressuring the government to sort of take serious action to deal with the health aspect of this pandemic.
While COVID-19 forced many events to be cancelled or postponed, 2 general elections took place in Asia. In April, South Koreans went to the polls despite soaring infections at the time. Officials had refused to call off the vote, having never postponed any election, even the one in 1952 during the Korean War.
We had to have extra caution imposed on them. And these journalists were brave enough to try to follow the candidate as much as possible, but at the same time have all the protective measures. It's very difficult. Unlike in the previous elections, normally we go to the election sites, around the clock, all our journalists. Just to be honest with you, I think our productivity was probably down by 20%, 30%, just because of the fact that we weren't able to get to the site. We did cover the election, but it was very tough. Hope that we don't have to do this again in the near future. We just want this COVID-19 to go away so that we can cover things in a normal fashion way.
The result was a landslide victory of over 60% for President Moon Jae-in's Democratic Party. In July, Singaporeans headed to the polls. The People's Action Party returned to power, but with fewer seats in Parliament, as the Workers' Party won a record 10. From campaigning to polling night, the Straits Times provided comprehensive coverage in print, digital and video of this historic election, dubbed Singapore's first true internet election.
Technology has been a lifeline during the pandemic, enabling journalists to continue to do their jobs, telling the stories that need to be told even when face-to-face interviews are impossible. Just like me here, conducting interviews virtually has become the norm.
Basically, the difference for our places.
With COVID-19 requiring us to physically distance from each other and limit our contact with those outside our social bubble, technologies such as video chat apps have allowed us to digitally connect. FaceTime, Skype, and Zoom have become a part of our daily lives, personally and professionally. Working from home has become the default arrangement, with meetings shifting online. Students and teachers have not been spared from the disruption either. Home-based learning with digital devices have been set in place by many institutions around the world. Journalists too have had to adapt.
Well, you look around a newsroom, it's relatively quiet. Normally it'll be bustling and it's full of activity and excitement. We've had, like many other organizations, to work in a distributed fashion. So a lot of our staff are at home in order to keep them safe and also to ensure that we don't pass the buck to each other. That makes it more challenging for a newsroom to operate.
The biggest change, having to attend press conferences virtually and conducting interviews through a computer screen instead of face-to-face. Here are journalists questioning ministers about Singapore's COVID-19 situation.
EMS, I would like to ask what Phase 3 will look like and when the restrictions on 5 people gathering will be lifted.
From officials to global superstars like Katy Perry.
And this record is called Smile because I walked through hell basically to get my smile back.
As far as interviews go, it looks like this arrangement is here to stay, even if it comes with its fair share of challenges.
We're in a business where reporters need to be out in the fields, seeing people face to face, conducting interviews face to face, that kind of stuff. It makes a lot of sense to have an office and to work from office. You need to be, human contact is important to get stuff done. But at the same time, we've shown that we can be just as effective by working from home, holding Zoom meetings. Everything's done over the phone.
I want you to stay.
With just about everything shifting online, entertainers like journalists continue to create content and get their message across. This original song, Stay Home, went viral in April during Singapore's partial lockdown. The music video, featuring 14 Singaporean artists like Young Raja and Charlie Lim, was filmed by the musicians in their own homes. On a different note, in July, Singaporean conductor Wong Kar-chun brought together musicians from 25 nations in a virtual concert to raise funds for charity, including the Straits Times School Pocket Money Fund and kids affected by the pandemic. Music doesn't stop even in a pandemic. But with the threat of COVID-19 still very real, big questions remain over what the future will look like. Right now, there are multiple vaccine trials taking place worldwide, and there are reasons to be hopeful.
We are now barely about 8 months into COVID-19 pandemic, and we have at least 35 vaccines that enter into clinical trial. In other words, been used on the human being. And it is very likely that by end of the year, we will see perhaps close to 60 of these vaccines entering into human trial. The challenge would be, how do we choose what would be the best? Which one will be the best in the field for us to use? And as of now, we are still not sure in terms of the vaccine's efficacy, as well as safety and durability.
While the world waits for a vaccine and the pandemic to stabilize, one thing is for sure, the world has changed forever. As we mark World News Day 2020, let us remember what journalism is all about and what it stands for. Journalism helps to get the facts out, put things in context, and make a difference to communities we serve.
That's really what World News Day is about. It's about making the case to the audience about why real news matters, not just to us journalists, but to everyone in the community, so that you can get good, credible information to the audience. This is why it's so important to the health and well-being of our societies.
Regardless of the platform, print, online or digital, whatever it takes to get the story, you can count on journalists to bring you the latest wherever it happens. And that is the spirit of journalism.